Good evening. Yeah, thank you for being here. This is the third Ignite that we've done, and the crowd keeps growing and growing. So we want to thank you for coming here and joining us. I'm assuming there are a lot of our will be speakers in the next few months that are sitting right here next to you. So if you're thinking about doing a presentation at some point, please let us know. I'm Charlie Krebs. I'm on the committee. There are a number of committee members. Could you put your hands up if you're on the committee? Talk to those people. Or over here, there's a sign-up list if you have some interest in participating in Ignite. So this is the third one that we're doing, and we have a great lineup of speakers for you. I'd also like to thank the speakers for the time that they put into this and the care they've been rehearsing. I'd also like to thank Three Sheep's Tap Room for being our host. Yeah! Great beer. I'm not a beer drinker, and James has turned me on to beer. So thank you. We'll take a break after three of our speakers so that you can go get a refill. But please thank them for hosting us here. So our first speaker is going to talk about Napoleon Hill. You may remember Napoleon Hill. He wrote the book Think and Grow Rich. He also has 17 Principles of Success. To explain that and tell her story, please welcome Penny Bruzewitz.
Thank you, Charlie. What do you have your mindset on? You can harness the power of your mind by adopting a definite major purpose or a goal. This enables you to make future decisions and use your definite purpose as a litmus test. Without it, you will drift aimlessly through life. In a nutshell, make a plan. Form a mastermind group. It's an alliance of two or more people with the same thought process or goal. It allows you to tap into their intelligence, knowledge, experience, and training. It's a great way to put to use the state of mind known as faith. Applied faith is an abstract idea and a mental state, but an active state of mind. It's believing in yourself. When an idea comes to you, you must have faith and act on it. Action is the requirement of faith. Put your running shoes on and go the extra mile. Give more and better service than that which you are asked or required to do. It enacts the universal law of compensation. You will find Mother Nature goes the extra mile in everything she does. Have a pleasing personality. It's what sets you apart from other people and will determine whether you are liked or disliked. It is your biggest asset or greatest liability. Personal initiative. It is the twin brother of going the extra mile. If you want to be successful, then you cannot be the person who only does what is asked of you or who never does more than what is asked of you. Positive mental attitude. This is essential and the best attitude in all circumstances. It helps you keep your mind on the things you want and off the things that you don't want. Just as positive people attract positive people, success attracts success. Enthusiasm, an intense emotion and a burning desire. The flame of enthusiasm is what turns your thoughts into actions. This is faith in action. Self-discipline, not fun, but it's the mastery of your thought. The taking possession of your own mind. If you direct your thoughts, control your emotions, you can obtain your destiny. It is essential for the other 16 principles of success. Accurate thinking. Very hard in today's world where the media and advertising tell us what to think and what to buy. But the accurate thinker separates fact from fiction and the important from the unimportant. Controlled attention. If you tell your mind what you're after, your subconscious kicks in and processes the millions of thoughts, but sends you the ones that are in line with your definite major purpose. Teamwork. Cooperation. It is willing, voluntary, and free. It's a priceless asset that you can give and receive. Wherever there is a dominating spirit of teamwork, success is inevitable. Have you ever heard of the movie Door to Door? If you have to learn from adversity and defeat, it's a great movie to watch. I like to add the word overcoming to learning from adversity and defeat. Creative vision. Develop the free and fearless use of your imagination. Regardless of whether you think you have a creative bone in your body or not, it can be learned. It's a thought process. Dreams begin in your mind and with your thoughts. Just think about what can be accomplished with a dream, and dare to dream. Maintenance of sound health. We've talked about the mind and the body, but they're interconnected. What one does definitely affects the other. So you need to start thinking about physical healthfulness and get out and do. How do you spend your time, your money? Are you a drifter? Someone once said, tell me how you use your time and your money, and I will tell you where and what you'll be doing 10 years from now. Time is money. The cosmic habit force. It's the universe and the laws that govern it. Order. It's infinite intelligence in operation. You are where you are and what you are because of your thought processes, your habits, and your deeds. But it can be changed. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. Napoleon Hill. Did I turn this off?
Thank you, Penny. Our next speaker is the theater director at UW Manitowoc. He believes that life is a journey. And here to tell us his story about culture shock is Michael Sheeks. Michael?
Thank you. How much room have we got on this? All right, it seems like most of you are that way, so we're going to play it that way. I'm going to have to try and employ my 17 principles of success here because everything just went out of my head. We ready? All right. So I like to travel. I like to travel a lot. And I fancy myself something of a cosmopolitan, sophisticated traveler. I go by myself. I take my backpack. It's always wonderful. This is a story about a moment when that is not what happened. About 3 years ago, after having traveled all of my life around the United States, I finally got out of the country and went overseas. I started in sunny Reykjavik, which fortunately was just a way stop on my way to Madrid, where I had a student who lived and I could stay with for free. It was January, and what I really wanted to do was get someplace warmer. So I traveled down to Cadiz and down to Gibraltar across the Straits and took a very old train to Fez in Morocco. Now, Fez in Morocco is about as different culturally from this place here as you can possibly imagine. And when I stopped in Cadiz, I discovered, and actually discovered all along the way, that the notion that anywhere you go, it's okay, people will speak English, yeah, that's bullshit. It does not work that way. I met lots of wonderful people who had no idea what I was talking about. And so I was confused a lot and struggled a lot, and it was kind of unexpected, and I was experiencing anxiety that I don't normally experience. Fortunately, when I got to Fez, I was staying in the ancient Medina, and I was at the Riyad Idrisi, which is a fancy bed and breakfast. It was lovely, oh my God, thank God. And so I would hide there. The locks left a little bit to be desired, but otherwise it was quite beautiful. And from that safe haven, I would go out into the ancient Medina, and what I experienced was a whole lot of people who really, really wanted to communicate with me about things they wanted me to buy. And even in Cadiz, which is relatively modern, the streets were narrow, the experience was kind of intense, everybody was in my personal space, and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? And again, I thought I was pretty sophisticated, but yeah, dude, no, not so much. And so in the ancient Medina, what I found was that they have these narrow streets, there's no cars, everything gets around on donkeys, and I, by the end of the day, was just exhausted and paranoid and wandering around outside and wanting to hide. And I thought, oh my God, my mind is frickin' blown. And I really had no control over what I was doing anymore and had lost complete track of why I was there in the first place. I mean, why do we travel? We travel because we want to experience other cultures. And I was in this place of culture shock, and I had no idea what I was doing. So the next morning I got up, I did some Googling, and discovered that the strategy I should take was to ignore everybody, keep my head down, eyes front, don't talk to anybody, and just keep moving. I thought, what? Right? Because everything is supposed to be a con, and so that just didn't make sense to me. So I took this long walk around the Medina. And by the time I was done, I was exhausted emotionally, physically, mentally. And this just wasn't making any sense to me. It wasn't me. It didn't feel like me. First of all, I wasn't used to being that incompetent. But I was like, why can't I engage these people? And granted, your first overseas travel, maybe the ancient city in Fez is not the right choice. But it was beautiful, and I was having a good time, and it was a great place to be, except that my brain was kind of having a hard time dealing with it all. So I finally just took a deep breath. And I thought, you know, what you really need to do is rethink why you're here. And you just have to let this happen to you. And you know what? These people that are in your face, they're not conning you. That's bullshit. Those people, they just are trying to make a buck like you do every day of your life. It just doesn't look like what we think it should look like here in America. So I let go of that, and I went out, and there's these beautiful mosques, and the people, of course, are friendly, right? Even there are a couple of dudes near the Riyadh who they would greet me every morning, and they wanted to take me someplace, and I was like, no, I'm fine. But after a while, they kind of would see me. They would know, yeah, he won't buy anything. But they would still be friendly, right? They were friendly people. And there's this beautiful restaurant down the street, and I had a really good experience there. And it just took me a while to figure out that I could unhook and just let it happen. There's a... Damn, now it's gone. Anyway, there was this place I went where this guy wanted to sell me a tour for 600,000 dinar. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. Actually, it isn't. So really not much at all. And I laughed and I smiled because that was my new strategy. And he laughed and he smiled and he looked at me and he, because I wasn't buying anything from him, he kind of made fun of me a little bit. And I walked out of the room and I thought, you know, that's okay because I'm just going to smile and enjoy it and move past culture shock. Thank you.
Sometime in the 13 or 1400s, when Gutenberg invented the printing press, the whole paradigm of everything changed. Now we live in a society where there's so much information available to us, but back then, stories, before Gutenberg, stories were how information was spread. And so that's why we're all here, to listen to these wonderful people tell their stories. Our next speaker inherited memoirs from her aunt, who unfortunately suffered from dementia and her life was a mystery. But in these memoirs, our next speaker discovered a journey, and she's here to tell us about it. Please welcome Barbara Alvarez.
So about 2 years ago, I found myself driving on a country road, stopping in front of this white farmhouse, getting out of the car, and asking the guy who lived there if I could tour the property and go inside the house. It's not something I usually do, but I had a reason for this. And the reason had everything to do with a diary. It's a diary that was kept by a young country girl named Margaret Martin from 1923 to 1930. She wrote in it almost every day. She received this diary when she went away to boarding school, and it was her source of comfort for many years. After boarding school, she moved to Chicago, and she lived the majority of her life with her younger sister, Mary, and their mother, Laura. She worked for 45 years for Commonwealth Edison with her sister. Neither of them married, neither of them had kids. But to me, she was my Aunt Margaret, and she was my Aunt Mary. My parents actually met them in the 1970s after they just got married. They all lived in a condo together, and they became friends. And then when my sister and I were born, they said, you should call us Aunt Mary and Aunt Margaret, and so we did. And they were closer to us than, you know, any blood relative ever could be. They never missed a birthday, a graduation, or anything. But for me, Aunt Margaret was a little bit of a mystery to me, and it was mostly because she had dementia, so it was really difficult to have a conversation with her. After her 90th birthday, they moved into a nursing home. Aunt Mary refused to leave her sister because even though Aunt Mary could live independently, they'd lived together their whole life. So they moved to a nursing home, and Aunt Margaret really had no idea where she was. She really couldn't hold down a conversation. So she just looked at pictures from the past. So I learned a little bit about her past while talking to her about these pictures. She passed away at 98 years old. A few years after that, Aunt Mary passed away at 100 years old, and I inherited all these pictures and her diary. And I decided to read into the diary and research it so I could understand a little bit more about the aunt that I didn't really know. So I learned that she grew up in the country, and when she was 14, her cousin gave her a diary to give her before she went away to boarding school. There's cool entries like writing about Charles Lindbergh, crossing the Atlantic, practicing the Charleston, and there's a lot of entries that are typical of any teenage diary, starting a new chapter of your life, making friends, trying to fit in. She did make a good group of friends at boarding school, and she joined the theater group there. She had a lot of fun. There's also some hidden mementos in the pages of the diary, like a picture of her boyfriend, Barney Long, and newspaper clippings that she saved, including one from when her parents met in 1905. Her mom was a nurse from Chicago who had moved down to Kankakee, and she was nursing a patient back to health. And she fell in love with that patient's older brother, John Martin. And they got married, and she moved on the Martin family farm, and that's where they raised their 3 kids. So there were so many entries talking about this life and the background of the life that I didn't really know about. But there are also some sad entries, too, as anybody's life has the ups and the downs. She wrote about her dad visiting her at boarding school, saying their mom has moved out, she moved back to Chicago, and he was crying, hoping the family could get reunited. A few months after that, this was the last picture taken of them as a family. Their mom officially moved out, and he died of a broken heart. Their younger brother went in to live with relatives, and Mary and Margaret moved to Chicago with their mom. That's where the diary ends. So I wanted to know a little bit more, to see if there was something that I could see in real life from these pages of the diary. So I made a journey down to where the boarding school was. It's no longer there, but the grotto is there. And then I also got to go to their local history center where they said, we don't really have much, but indeed I found a scrapbook that was donated by one of her classmates, and there were pictures of Aunt Margaret in there, as well as her signature and class notes and graduation notes. And it really gave context to what I'd read in the diary. And of course I had to stop at the house. And I'm really glad that I did that, because the man told me that the house was so old and so expensive to maintain, the land was worth more, and he'd be burning it down that summer. So I'm glad I got to see it when I had the chance. I got to go in the house and see the room that she was born in. I got to go in the barns where they played and tour the property, and it really brought the diary that I'd been researching for so long to reality. It brought it to life. And I learned that we all have different pasts, we all have different journeys, and it all shapes who we are, and everybody's story is unique. One of her last entries that she wrote in the diary says, "I'll never forget these days as long as I have the brains to remember them." And in the end, she lost her memory, but Aunt Margaret will never be forgotten.
So our next speaker has a one-of-a-kind friend, and here to tell us her story, The Walkabout, is Christia Wildflower.
Yeah, I've been sick all week, sorry. So many people have told me that my home and my yard is welcoming and warm. I try to make it a sanctuary for those who need a place to relax and rejuvenate. And I'm often known to take strays in, like this one here. This is a bearded dragon who was a very old guy and was homeless. I took him in and I named him Mr. Ziffel, and we hang out together a lot. He mostly stays at home, but one night after sunset, I went to find him and bring him inside, and he was nowhere to be found. It seems that he had gone on a walkabout. He had gone across the street, up the neighbor's lawn, and her steps. And he was sitting there on her top step, and she said, I think your little friend is over here. I was so happy to find him. Mostly he stays close to home, and he hides in the hostas or other plants near the house. He had never gone that far before. I keep him on the porch sometimes where I entertain people a lot. It's a shady, warm spot. But you see, Mr. Ziffel and I, we are sun lovers. I take him a lot of places during the summer, and people think of us as party animals because we love to meet people. And he's a great conversation starter. One of my friends even says he's good for picking up guys. You know who you are. I'm also an activist, so I'll take him on location when we're, trying to talk about a particular cause, and he's become a poster boy. And when he gets too tired or excited or worn out, he'll simply crawl into my purse. And once he's all bagged up, then we're ready to go on our next adventure. You see, we both really love the warm Sheboygan summers, so that means traveling on the scooter. I'll tuck him in my purse, strapped across my body, where he's safe and warm, and we go out and meet new people. People young and old have met him and are familiar with him. Who's met Mr. Ziffel in here? All right, look at you people. Yeah. Well, not everybody's a fan, as you could tell by that little guy. But one time I was performing at a Renaissance fair, and he had court with the Queen. He fit in there very, very well with the whole fantasy dragon thing, That was until he disappeared in plain sight. He's able to do that. I mean, look at how he's camouflaged. We looked for hours. And then they finally were closing the gate, the drawbridge. We had to leave. Finally, we found him under my car. Once we got home, he was in solitary confinement for quite a while. Perhaps he was planning his next great escape. Now, I didn't mention to you that bearded dragons come from Australia, the land down under, like under the hostas, under my car, and under my nose. But he's a fun little fella. Now, let's take a moment to reflect and think about what a cold, cold environment Wisconsin winters are for a couple of seniors who really enjoy the sunshine. Once summer came around again, we were committed to eating healthy. And we became hunter-gatherers. We'd go out and find whatever we could. And we wanted to get more exercise. And that's where he excelled. He went on a walkabout in the outback of my yard. You see, the yard goes on for a long time, and then it connects to the yard of the hospital. And he disappeared there until a nurse found him. I went round and round trying to find him, and eventually I found out that he had been taken to the Lakeshore Aviary Reptile Rescue in Sheboygan. They do great work. I pledged never to let him take a walk on the wild side by himself again. He was going to have no more games of hide and seek or ring around the rosy. He would stay in the porch where he could enjoy life of leisure as a lizard lounge. A lounge lizard. Thank you.
Thank you, Christia. In 490 BCE, the largest Persian military force attacked Athens, Greece. An Athenian messenger was sent on foot to seek assistance in the Battle of Marathon. And what happened next is the story of our speaker, Roy Peering.
Thank you, Charlie. General Miltiades set up his defenses at the Bay of Marathon, on the plains of Marathon, and he saw 50,000 Persian enemy troops disembarking. He had a defensive strategy because he knew he would not be able to win a battle unless he had help. A messenger by the name of Pheidippides was sent to Sparta to seek help from the Spartan warriors. They were fierce warriors. However, they were in a religious period and did not come. They would not come for 6 days. Fast forward 2,400 years, the Greeks built the first modern-day Olympic stadium, Panathinaikos, in 1896, and they introduced the world to a new race, named after Pheidippides' one leg from Marathon to Athens. He left this Acropolis and ran to Sparta, which is approximately 150 miles away. I also left that same place. In 2010, they celebrated the 2,500th year of the Battle of Marathon and their victory, and they celebrated wildly. This is an area where I departed from 4 times in this race and completed all 4 races from Athens to Sparta. And this is where Pheidippides returned on his final leg from the plains of Marathon and announced, Niki, Niki, ne nakaman, which means, rejoice, we have conquered. They defeated the army. This was a canal that was dug 50 miles from Athens. It was the Corinth Isthmus, and it joined the Adriatic and Aegean Seas, and that was the first checkpoint in the race at 50 miles, which had to be accomplished in 10 hours. When Pheidippides ran, he did not have the ability to have an aid station every 5 kilometers like we did. So it was very difficult for him to do that 350 miles. This is one section of trail that remains. We have the advantage of running on roads now that are paved and smooth in most cases. But this is the kind of thing that he had to run and negotiate. My third try to reach the podium, I've tied with a gentleman from Finland, Seppo Leinonen, and on his side was his son, Harry, and on my side was a little boy that I met 3 years early by the name of Alexander Kleinos. This is me holding up the award, and the reason I'm grinning is, number one, is the name on my award is Seppo, and the name on his is Roy. I also looked up and saw the Finnish flag, the national anthem played, and I was really disappointed. And then the wind blew, and my anthem played, and I got to see the American flag. Another ceremony was performed in Athens, and we received a special cup. It was a cup that had been found, and no other cup like it ever had been found since, so we got a replica of it. All finishers received a nice big bronze ingot of this here design, and were called up in the square in Sparta the night of the race end. There was a 36-hour time limit to reach it. Each athlete also received an olive branch wreath put on their head by the mayor of Sparta, and also we got a ceremonial drink, which was actually water from a well that they no longer use for public consumption. This is the dedication ceremony at the Battle of Marathon site. Behind the soldier there is a hill called the Soros, and that's where they buried the war dead. There was 192 Athenians killed and 6,400 Persians. Joan Benoit Samuelson, the first woman to win the marathon in 1984 and the first Olympic marathon, lit the dedication for the Battle of Marathon Museum, as I thought it was called. I went inside and, oh, well, yeah, there's the hat. I had to try it on. I wanted to be an Athenian or a Spartan. It turns out that the museum is not dedicated to the battle. It's actually dedicated to marathon running. This was a marker, number 40. This is where the first marathon started in 1896 in the Olympics. And now a marathon is actually 42.2 miles because it was extended when the Queens wanted to see it finished at her special box in the stadium. I was asked by the son of Stellanos Karikides, who was the winner of the 50th Boston Marathon, to present some items in that running museum. Here I'm crossing the Corinth Canal, and I've applied to return. And if I do, I hope to meet my friend Seppo from Finland at the finish line and say, Niki, Niki, Nikama. Rejoice, we come.
Thank you, Roy. We're doing well. We have 2 more speakers to go. Our next speaker has gained a lot of experience over several decades. She's faced a lot of challenges in her life. And in her story called Facing Your Fears, please welcome Bev Shelhaus.
Good evening. Good evening. Sira Masadi said, "Don't be afraid of challenges. Let them lead you to somewhere new." I faced a lot of challenges in my life, as I know you have too. When I was young, I was up north visiting relatives, and when I was around 10, when I went swimming in the Oconto River with some friends. Everything was going fine until I went out a little bit too far, and I stepped over a drop-off. I almost drowned. It made me very fearful of water. Then a few years later, when I was a student at Rufus King High School in Milwaukee, I noticed that they offered swimming classes. So I signed up. Rufus King does not have a swimming pool. So students had to leave after lunch, take the city bus to the natatorium, have your lesson, and then go back to school. Well, I learned how to swim. I loved it. Then I noticed the Red Cross was offering lifeguard classes in the evenings, so I signed up for that. It was very difficult, but there were some cute guys in there that made it worthwhile. So I got my certificate, and one summer I even worked on the waterfront at a Girl Scout camp. Very fun. I just loved being in the water or being near the water. Another challenge that I faced was I didn't like big machines like cars. They seemed confusing and complicated. And I liked getting around Milwaukee on the city buses, so I didn't learn how to drive when I was 16. And then 10 years later, when I was 26 and pregnant with my 4th child, some friends took me out to learn how to drive. And I got the hang of it. I could hardly fit behind the wheel when I took the test, but I passed. It was so nice to go grocery shopping by myself, my time alone. Another fear that I had was of needles, perhaps because when I was younger, I had a lot of scratches and poking around to find out what I was allergic to, ragweed. But anyhow, I didn't want to have anything to do with needles after that. And once when I was visiting one of my sisters in Milwaukee, she talked me into going to give blood with her. So I did. It wasn't too bad. And they had free food afterwards. That was great. Soon I was a regular blood donor. I have 4 sisters and 3 brothers. And we were kind of labeled when we were young. You had the pretty one, the athletic one, the defiant one. Well, I was a dumb one. I never got anything. People laughed at me. And then in my late 30s, when my marriage was ending, I decided to go on to school. But I didn't know if I was smart enough. So I got a scholarship for one class at UW Sheboygan. I took it, and I did okay. I got an A. Then I took 2 classes. Soon I was a full-time student. I transferred over to Lakeland, Had a lot of fun there, met some other older students who were also commuting, graduated, got married again. And then I thought, oh, maybe I should try going on. Joshua Moran says, challenges are what make life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. So I had this idea in mind to go to graduate school. I got a teaching fellowship at Marquette University. I had to take classes and teach one class a semester. It was a 2-year program. So when the 2 years were up, I took the exam, a 2-day written exam, with about 5 other graduate students, and none of us passed. Oh, it was so embarrassing, so hard. But we could retake it in 1 year. So I decided to go for it. I had a shoebox full of index cards that I made of every poet and writer, from Chaucer to Joyce, from Emerson to Stevens, and I made cassettes of every literary period through the centuries, and I listened to them in the car on the way to work and home, and whenever I had time. So the year was up, time to retake the exam, and this time I passed. So I just want to ask you what you can do in your life to challenge yourself.
Thank you, Bev. Our next speaker would probably never be called a slacker. So, why is his story entitled, How a Slacker Got Religion About Democracy? Please welcome Kevin Anderson.
That'll good. Good, cool. So I am a member of Generation X, and millennials, I am sure you have had it up to here with all of the scorn that is sent your way by people like me and Gen X and baby boomers. You're told you're lazy. You're told that you're entitled narcissists. And if you're with me, you want to ban the epithet snowflakes. But don't feel too bad. 'Twas ever thus. I mean, I can remember back in the 90s, and they said Gen Xers were self-absorbed, underachieving, disengaged, and there was an insult that became so common for us that it was the title of a book, title of a movie, and it was the point that they called us slackers. Now, I've never counted myself much of a slacker professionally, but civically, I have to admit, I was one. For the first 10 years that I was eligible, I did not vote. I'm not proud about that, but I didn't. And I was a master at rationalizing my disengagement. No candidate was perfect enough for me. No candidate's views aligned with my perfect vision of the world. They were all too venal, they were corrupt, I didn't see much difference between the parties then. Which is to say, I'm not here to preach or to judge anyone. But it was worse than that. As a journalist, I'm a professional skeptic. But I suffered from an overarching corrosive skepticism. This is a t-shirt that I have, and it pretty much reflects my mistrust of not only government, but everything. I didn't trust anyone or anything. So how did this slacker get religion about democracy? Oddly, it started because I got closer to people in government and politics because I covered it. I met people who were really smart and dedicated. Well, maybe not like Johnny Lydon of the Sex Pistols in the 2000 Democratic Convention, but you know what I mean. But the first chink in my armor of apathy came during that election, Gore v. Bush. Hanging Chads. I covered it for the BBC. And it was the first time that I realized that a handful of votes really could count. But what really changed my worldview was getting out into the world. I met people who were suffering under repressive regimes, but also people who were experiencing democracy for the first time. I was fortunate enough to work with Al Jazeera during the Arab Spring, and one day I came into the office and all of the journalists were arguing in Arabic. They were wondering what to call the events of the Arab Spring. Was it unrest? Was it an uprising? Was it a revolution? And from the back of the office, somebody shouted out in English, "You cannot call it a revolution. That's the word we use in Iraq against the Americans." I called my translator, the Jordanian Tom Payne. He had a blog, and he was really proud because his views were so controversial that he'd actually been called in question by the Jordanian secret services. And he said, "We are evoluting, we are evoluting." Later that year, I was in Tunisia working with journalists to help them cover their first free and fair elections in 30 years. They went from no democracy to almost too much. They had to choose between 1,800 slates of candidates from 80 political parties. And on election day, they messaged me on Twitter wishing me that I was there. But it was an overwhelming task for them. They said during a tea break, they're like, "Kevin, help us. We don't know what we're doing. We haven't covered an election in 30 years where we don't know the outcome." But I can't adequately convey to you the joy that they had just to be able to vote, the fact that they had control of their public lives again. And that washed away the cynicism that I had about my own democracy and gave me a sense of ownership about what it meant to be an American. But 3 years ago, I moved back to the US, to Sheboygan, and I found that my disease of distrust had actually become a national epidemic. Since 2000, our trust has collapsed in almost every single public institution we have. Not just government, but schools, churches, everything. As a matter of fact, the Economist Intelligence Unit has just downgraded the US. We're now no longer a full democracy, we're a flawed one. But it's not because of our choices of leaders, it's because of this distrust. And I realized that a lot of people who were checking out of democracy were a lot like me, the old me. The majority of people who did not vote in the last election were white, middle-aged, middle-income people. The old me was a big part of the problem. I meet the old me a lot. I was recently talking to my doctor about healthcare, and we both expressed some level of dissatisfaction with the status quo, but he reflexively said, "I don't trust the government." And I thought to myself, what would we have to do to have institutions that we trust again? So, first step, how many of you know that we have a local primary on the 21st of February and general elections on the 4th? You know what? You're not representative. The turnout for most of our primaries is 3.5%. So get out and vote. There's actually some candidates in the room. Secondly, to quote my wonderful wife, she says, "Democracy is not a solitary pursuit." Reach out to a friend. Get him or her involved. One of the reasons that I'm more involved in Sheboygan than any other place that I've lived is because people here have reached out to me and got me involved. I really enjoy it. Lastly, find an institution you believe in or you want to believe in and pour your soul into it. I don't care if it's your local schools, your church, Congress, Common Council, do it. A government for the people, by the people, and of the people shall not perish, but only if we the people commit to it. Thank you.
What a palette of great speakers, huh? Nice job, everyone. Thank you.
You have something to say?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Lisa Vihos, and there's many of us on the committee are out in the room tonight. I want to thank all the committee members. I want to thank all the speakers. It was fabulous, and this is the biggest crowd we've had so far. I would say. I was like counting. I'm thinking we have about 120 people here. It's pretty awesome. And a couple things. Ignite Sheboygan started as a kind of grassroots, we just thought, let's try this storytelling thing. And it's wonderful to see people coming forward to tell stories. We have no budget, we have no, funds to do things, but we have a donation box. So if you want to throw in $1 or $5 or whatever. But more than anything, we'd love if you were inspired tonight by what you heard and you have a story that you want to tell. Come sign this sheet. We will be in touch with you, and we'll get you into the mix. We're going to try to. We've done them so far every other month since last October. So the next event is going to be in April, right? April, and we'd love to have your story. So come on, sign the sheet, and we'll get you in the mix. Okay? Thanks, everybody.